Is it worth going to war to prevent a nuclear weapon in Iran?
No, it isn't worthwhile. And the only way you would do that is you would have to go to the Congress. We as Commander-in-Chief aren't making the decision to go to war. You know, the old-fashioned way, the Constitution, you go to the Congress and find out if our national security is threatened. And I'm afraid what's going on right now is similar to the war propaganda that went on against Iraq. You know, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and it was orchestrated, and it was, to me, a tragedy of what's happened these last 10 years, the death and destruction, $4 trillion in debt. So no, it's not worthwhile going to war. If you do, you get a declaration of war, and you fight it, and you win it, and get it over with.
Thank you, Congressman.
Stephen writes, I served on an aircraft carrier during the Vietnam War. I believe that torture is always wrong in all cases. What is your stance on torture?
Torture is illegal, and by our laws, it's illegal by international law.
How do you define torture, sir?
Waterboarding is torture, and many other things. It's illegal under international law and under our law. It's also immoral, and it's also very impractical. There's no evidence that you really get reliable evidence. Why would you accept the position of torturing 100 people because you know one person might have information? And that's what you do when you accept the principle of torture. I think it's uncivilized and have no practical advantages, and it's really un-American to accept on principle that we will torture people that we capture.
And
Major, I have to weigh in on this. I have to say something.
Congressman Paul, covert operations in Syria, a green light for you?
I think it would be a mistake. I think the Syrians ought to deal with their country. I think
but what about the 3,500 dead?
Well, there's been a lot of people killed throughout the world in the last century. You know, the Soviets and the Chinese killed hundreds of millions, but we didn't feel compelled morally to try to stop it. No, it's a tragedy. And it would be nice if they would accept different views. But for us to get into covert operations, then you have troops involved.
Thank you, Congressman.
And it's very costly.
Thank you,
not
Congressman.
a good idea.
Within days of taking office, President Obama, by executive order, stopped the CIA from using classified enhanced interrogation techniques that are not waterboarding. There's a presumption that every person at Gitmo under the Obama administration should go into civilian court, not military commission. And the Obama administration recently said that any future captures in the war on terror would not go to Gitmo. Would you continue these policies? If you could change them, why?
This is a mess. It's a mess because we have a bad foreign policy. We're pretending we're at war. We haven't declared the war, but we're at war against a tactic, and therefore there's no limits to it. So we create these monstrosities, and we do things outside the law. We come up with assassinations, allowing the president to decide who's going to be assassinated. And lo and behold, 3 Americans now have been on the list. They've been assassinated, but they don't talk about the second one because the second one happened to be a 16-year-old son of a Lockheed. So what are we doing here to accept this idea that our presidents and this lawlessness to pursue, and that we someday will be subject to those same courts? So no, you don't. You want to live in the law and obey the law, because otherwise it's going to be very bad for all of us. And this whole idea that now we can be assassinated by somebody that we don't even like to run our medical care, and giving this power to the president to be the prosecutor, the executor, the judge, and the jury, we better look at that carefully before you automatically endorse something like that.
Congressman, thank you very much.
I voted for the authority to go after bin Laden. I was upset because it took 10 years because we were diverted from going after him and doing the job. But that's a lot different than assassinating American citizens. I mean, he wasn't a citizen. But I do want to remind you that over 300 individuals were tried in civilian courts here that were charged with terrorism here. Most of them are in jail, and I don't think we should give up so easily on our rule of law.
Congressman Paul, thank you very much.
Here's the numbers. We got Ron Paul in at 22,776. It's a landslide once again, 8 minutes later.
Didn't really have a lot of support last time. Newt Gingrich was pushed up. Herman Cain, who's a total shill for the New World Order and the federal bank and the federal Reserve Bank, the World Bank, Rick Perry, another crook from Texas, and Michelle Bachmann. Don't need to say much about her. She's already stuck her foot in her mouth. All of these people are losing tremendously to Ron Paul, and they got a lot more airtime. Ron Paul here in the debate showing 22,776. Now look what happens. What you're going to see now. Ron Paul is now another 5,000 ahead. Rick Santorum is gaining very little ground, falling behind. Huntsman is getting very little bit. Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, Perry with 18,000. They're pushing him real hard. And again, Michelle Bachmann barely hanging on at all. And there's Herman Cain, now surrounded by sex scandals. We don't know if those scandals are true or false, but he was on the Kansas Federal Reserve. He's a total insider with the New World Order. He's the one who wants to keep wars going, even though a lot of black soldiers will die in those wars. Ron Paul, way over here on the right, not to mean politically right, he's just politically correct. Ron Paul, 27,278. Then they pull the poll because they don't want people to see Ron Paul's winning. This is CBS News, what I call the snooze news. They want you to snooze and not think.
Later, CBS pulled down the poll because Ron Paul was winning.
Now we go back again and look, and they pulled all the numbers off. You can't open any of it up. They've closed it. They don't want people to know. This is New World Order control. CBS News is just a shill news reporting mouthpiece for the New World Order. This is what they did in 2007. They tried to ditch Ron Paul and not let people know he's the candidate people really want. Prosperity, peace, that's Ron Paul. All the rest want war, death, and destruction. All the others, bar none, on the Democrat or Republican, will take us to death and destruction of America. And our children, our grandchildren, will suffer if Ron Paul is not elected.
It's just unbelievable.
Not all this, Ron Paul got to speak for about 88 seconds. 88 seconds. He was given the least amount of time of all the candidates, and yet he still pulled way ahead. And then they pulled the poll. Now, an insider at CBS tells me Ron Paul, at the last count, was way over 40,000 and climbing rapidly, while Bachmann, Santorum, and even Perry from Texas were falling behind and just not keeping up. So they pulled the poll. They pulled the poll. They pulled their own poll off the internet. They don't want people to know Ron Paul is really the people's candidate. What a media we have. Or should I call it a propaganda organization for the New World Order. Well, that's my view. I'm William Wagner. My vote doesn't count much. My voice doesn't carry very far. But you people better make sure you know what you're doing when you go to the primaries. Make sure they don't use vote scanning machines that scan your votes. You need paper ballots, or they will re-rig it just like they did in the past, and they'll make whoever they want to win the winner. Because the Diebold or Sequoia-type vote scanning machines are total junk. It allows them to steal your vote and give it to who they want to. Pay attention, people. This may be the last time we have a real candidate for president who stands with the people and not with the corporations for war, death, and destruction. This is what the media said.
A CBS News poll released just before the debate showed that Cain was leading the pack with 18%. Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich were tied for second with 15%.
What did she just say?
Slip sliding away, slip sliding